Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. This is Shoaib Zaidi and you are watching 72 News. Today's show is very special and I think most of the females in the world must know about date today. Today is 25th of November. And when it's coming to the 25th of November, we know that today is the International Day for the Elimination of Violence Against Women. So today's topic is going to be more social than a political. And I don't like to change my panel, and I believe that I have a good understanding of my panel, and there is many reasons that why I need the same panel for my social topic also. So let me introduce my panel again. I like to introduce Professor Grant Pittman, and he is today with us. I believe that if I like to introduce honestly his services in Australian government, in Australian services, as a government personnel, I think it need a full program just to introduce Mr. Grant Pittman. Yes. Similarly, another guest with me, Dr. Bernard Malik, similar level, similar height, and similar services, but in a wider range. Mr. Pittman served the Australian community, Australian government, Australian system. However, Dr. Bernard Malik served the people from the all multicultural interfaith, and I think similar things for Dr. Bernard Malik, that if I like to talk services about Mr. Dr. Bernard Malik, I need a really full time. Dr. Bernard Malik, I like to thank before starting my program to you, because on Monday we have a program on political discussion, and you advised me to change it, and we will do it on the social topic, which is important. And you also announced today, which I'm going to inform today to my all audience, that on every social topic, Mr. Dr. Bernard Malik and Professor Grant Pittman is going to help us, and we are going to have some discussion on these kind of topics. Let's come back to the topic today. So today, as we discussed, that violence against women, and in Australia, worldwide, every country, in all religion, no matter whatever the religion you are, you're Muslims, you have the still same problem. And again, unfortunately, we are the most advanced people. And if you see the rate of divorce and all these issues and violence rate day by day coming up and up. So today we would like to find out why these things is not getting better. But before going that, I'd like to know from Professor Grant Pittman. He was the 5-year head of the department where they are looking after the violence against female women, and I like to know what exactly his role was and what they were doing, and then we will discuss more and take the question answer. Thank you very much, Professor Pittman. Sir, can I ask you, you've been to the head of a department, which I learned from your profile, that you've been head of the violence against women for 5 years. So what was exactly your role, and what is the reason of such institute?
Yes, I was the superintendent of police for the Queensland Police Department.
Right.
And was responsible for domestic violence policy and strategy for the Queensland Police for about 5 years.
Right.
Which meant that I worked on policy and legislation for the Queensland government.
Right.
And also had input into the national policy for the police and other government agencies at what they call the COAG meeting. It's the joint meetings of the ministers and the government.
Right.
I've also worked in the field in policing, where I've had to issue domestic violence orders, including on police themselves.
Right.
And I've worked in areas where we had domestic violence orders probably on every second, third, fourth house in the street, including interstate domestic violence orders. And in one community I worked, there were so many domestic violence orders, it was almost impossible and very difficult for the police to be able to handle all the orders that were going on. And I've also helped in the research with Griffith University here in Brisbane, which is one of the major universities that researches domestic violence in Australia. And currently, to my understanding, has the Queensland police databases on domestic violence trends and data that have occurred in Queensland, and I believe also in Australia. So I've had a lot to do with domestic violence and these issues over many, many years.
Definitely, and we will going to learn from you today, and we will going to find out exactly. There are so many questions we receive from this topic, and you've been part of the system, not the part of the system. You've been head of the system, not head of the system. You are the policy maker. So the policy maker is mainly responsible if the things are working fine. Anyway, now let me go back to Dr. Bernard Malik. Dr. Bernard Malik, thank you very much for your time. And again, as usual, you are the most friendly person while you're looking the team, you're looking after your people. And Dr. Bernard Malik, why do you think that we have to postpone that Monday, our weekly Monday talk show, and we have to do the talk show on this social topic? Why do you think?
I think elections possibly don't touch us at home the way women do. We are grateful to our mothers, we are grateful to our sisters, our daughters, our wives, and all the women we come in contact with. They're almost 40% of the world. And I think anything that touches them is way more important than discussions relating to who the premier and who the prime minister and who the president would be. And especially when it comes to this important day that was instituted by United Nations in 1999, an international day for elimination of violence against women. I think we all have been witness to certain level or certain kind of violence against women.
Yes.
In our lives. Regardless of which country you come from, whether you come from the subcontinent, India, Pakistan, or you come from Australia, or I've been in US for a very long time, everywhere you find this violence against women. It's a very broad topic, but there is all form of violence that can happen to them. You know, physical violence, yes, emotional violence, sexual violence, you name it, all kind of violence that happens. So that is why I felt it was important that we discuss this. These days are instituted, so there is awareness about it.
I know, Dr. Bernard Malik, and I have a question which raised to me, and I know that I can't give a better answer than you. So I'm just transferring to you that when we discuss about the violence against women, and we three men hosting a show of violence against women, how do you think that we can fulfill that exactly requirement of such kind of show?
Yes, why not? If you see the part when it comes to spreading awareness, we can do better job than women do.
Right.
Trust me, after I shared it on my Facebook and LinkedIn, I received so many information requests. Right. I think, wow, we are doing our duty.
Right.
Because when people want to inquire about it, women want to participate in this, then we are doing our duty.
Wonderful.
What is interesting is there is more women that do violence to women than men.
Yes, we will come on this topic. Yeah, definitely.
In our continent, the woman that is the mother-in-law does more violence to her daughter-in-law than the husband does.
Right, right.
So these things are really, really interesting and touching, because why this day came to be instituted was 3 sisters were assassinated.
Right.
On Dominican Republic in 1960.
Right.
And their assassination was ordered by the president that time.
By the president, by the system.
By the system. And so the UN came in to recognize that day, and that is why 25th is celebrated. Unfortunately, this is not celebrated equally in all the countries. Many countries don't even recognize this day. That is because they want to keep their eyes shut and don't want to give freedom to women.
Right, right. I think we will. I'll get back to you, and I'll find out from you that okay, why it's not going to be celebrated in all country. What is lagging there? What is missing? And when you talk about the violence, women against women, what exactly could be a reason? And then we will discuss. I like to talk to Professor Grant. You've been part of the system. You part of the policy maker. Now, being the people those work with you. I know I met many of people where you are part of the system. They believe you are very honest on your work ethics. So, what exactly do you think in 5 year time? What was the main reason lagging for this issue? Like, why do you think that violence start against women? And what precautions in your policy you added?
I was heavily involved in going to domestic violence incidences back in the 70s, but
Right.
it increased dramatically in the 80s. It seemed to be relating to alcohol abuse in the family was a key factor. Another factor was there were different types of relationships starting to emerge in the Australian society. Marriage wasn't necessarily the option of most people. Alternative lifestyles became it. Commitments in relationships changed. And as a result of that, and there's varying views from power relationships, control and so on. But in the 80s in Australia, saw more and more violence in relationships, probably more so on the women's side with men, and government authorities didn't have any power to deal with it. And so Australian government started bringing in what they call domestic violence legislation. It now covers family issues and other intervention strategies. So they then started putting in legislation in the mid-80s to late 1990s across all the states. And as a result of that, there was an ability to intervene in relationships and try and put orders in place to reduce the violence between men and women, particularly women. Women are certainly the majority group in here. And so the Australian federal government became more involved in about 2000, and they now have a 12-year strategy which is due for renewal in about 18 months, 2 years' time. And now's actually an opportunity where people may be able to submit submissions to the government because they will have a review on their strategy in the next 12 months or so to put up some solutions or improvements to the system or the processes that currently exist in Australia.
Right. So it means I'll get back to I'll get back to you and find out that when it's coming to the renew, what exactly how your system was working. Does the information is reaching to every individuals, every Australians about their feedback and how the outcome will be there? And what do you think? What was added in 12 years time, and what can be removed or can be added? Well, I'll get back to you, Dr. Bernard Malik. You've done the PhD in the interfaith. Ultimately, it's. But again, when you do the PhD interfaith, there is some exercise about the understanding the psychology of the people, of the human beings, different. So, what exactly do you think that by the human being there is a major difference between a male or female or woman and is a man, in your opinion?
Yes, I think there is a gender inequality.
Gender inequality.
Yes.
Right.
So you would find India has 1/4 of world's population.
Right.
And India aborts close to 10 million females every year.
Right.
Okay, because male is a preferred gender there. So girls and boys are not equal.
Right.
And so is in Pakistan, and so is in Bangladesh and all our countries, including China and parts of Africa.
Right.
So because there is no equality, there is not equal respect.
Doctor, can I hold you for 1 minute? When you talk about the equality, because you've done the PhD in the comparison of the religion. In religion, I'm very clearly mentioned, like to share that in Islam, there is no equality concept in a value. Overall, there is equality, being a human being, same value. But in many areas, like there would be no prophet in female. They cannot lead the prey. So these kind of things is already there. But what you study in PhD, so when you talk about the equality, exactly what can you just elaborate a little bit more?
Look, there is a teaching of a religion, and then there is a practice that is a social format.
Yes.
I want to stay away from religion.
Right.
Just because sometimes you can be very sensitive to what is there and what is said.
Right.
But I would talk about the social practice.
Right.
The social practice generally comes partly from our culture, partly from our teachings, from sacred books.
Right.
Every religion evolves.
Right.
Over time. If you see ancient practices and Middle Eastern practices, Christianity did not accord equal rights to women.
Right. So it means that the social value of a male and a woman is equal.
Yes.
Right. And then again, so when you look, okay, you just discuss about India and all these things. So what exactly do you think that we are not accepting the social value? The system is lagging to accept the system value, and that's why it's leading to the violence against women?
Yes, absolutely. Because of inequality, there is less value accorded to women. If you really think, if you would see, let's practice. We're sitting. I'm sure a lot of people are sitting at home and watching us.
Yeah.
Right. They treat their son different than their daughters.
Right.
Daughter has to sweat out in the house, do the cleaning, do the this. Son comes like prince and he's treated like a prince.
Right.
And that's the unfortunate part. But from what I know from my friends, including you, I'm sure in your house, your daughter is treated like a princess and sons are treated like sons. Same
yes.
happens in my house. And it happens with a lot of people now. We are partial when it comes to loving our kids. We love our daughters more than we love our sons.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, that is not the reality of life.
That is not the reality of life. That's why I was thinking, for us, it looks normal that we have a good value. Any female, my mom, my wife, my daughter, we have very good value, and we believe whatever we are achieving, it's part. They have their part in my achievements.
Yes.
Professor Pittman, now coming back, I already give you a lead about that. Okay, now the policy going to be renewal after 18 months. So when it's coming, it means that they put a policy on the trial base of 12 years. Does the system works like that, or this is a normal phenomena for something like that when you are going to add it? And when it is going to be added, how the people can take the part? It's a good opportunity that you already inform my audience that there is a policy renewal is coming in 18 months. So if somebody wants to be a part of the renewal, what he can do or she can do?
What the government, this is the federal government, not the state governments. The state governments regularly review their intervention programs or whatever they've got. But the federal government has an overarching policy which runs for 12 years. The thinking behind it was that you needed a long-term strategy to deal with domestic violence. They're in their fourth planning part of the 12-year cycle, and there's basically six strategies built into, or six parts to the plan. And it allows, what the government usually does is have a public inquiry or an open public white paper or green paper, which allows members of organisations or individuals or academics, if that's the case, to make suggestions about improving the justice system or the services or the strategies or the programs being used by governments. But of course, state governments have their own strategies, and although there is some very good alignments federally, the states control the legislation and a majority of the services. So it's up to the state governments to decide what they will ultimately introduce. The federal government can, of course, and do provide budgets to the state governments to assist. But it allows people who may have a view about how domestic violence can be resolved to actually have some input into the future planning process of domestic violence in this country. And that includes immigrants and people of different cultural values having their input if they so desire.
Right. So when it's coming back to input, does they are inviting the people, or people can participate voluntarily, that if, something like that?
In the first plan that was drafted in 2010, over 2,000 people or organisations had input into the first plan. I would probably anticipate there will be well over 2,000 this time around.
Right.
So a lot of people will have input in whatever context they want to put it. And some may be interviewed personally by the government, others may make submissions in writing.
So when it's coming back to the input of the people, so ultimately I believe if 2,000, whatever the number they are, they must be victimized characters.
That's correct, yes. So victims can have their say, perpetrators can probably have their say. I doubt perpetrators would say much,
yeah.
But anybody from the community can have their say. Religions will have their say. I'd imagine most religions, including Muslims, will certainly have a submission put in. There will be academics who will have quite a bit of say. There will be professional people who work in the industry, social workers and psychologists, doctors who will have some say. And of course, there will be general people who will say how the system has supported them or has failed them, probably more so the failure rate. So yes, the victims will have their input and probably will be quite substantial.
Okay, let me go and have a difficult question to Dr. Malik. Dr. Banal Malik, elimination of the violence against women. You are running a academic institutes. You are busy in academic. You are busy in policies. You are busy in community services. If, let's say, we start to think about elimination, so what exactly we would like to eliminate from the system, then we can have the minimum violence, because I know that you can't eliminate or you can't remove 100%, but how we can. So what exactly we have to eliminate to achieve the good life?
Thank you. I think it's a very relevant question in today's context. Before you can get to the elimination state, you need to tell people what kind of violence is there and what is the percentage.
Yes.
Because most of us live in very secure homes where we love our women, we respect them, and we feel our women are secure in our homes, so they're secure everywhere. No, that's not so. I'll give you some of the figures that have been put out by United Nations.
Right.
35% of the women have experienced physical or sexual violence. And those figures can be as high as 70%. That means 2 out of every 3 women have experienced some kind of violence from their partner or other intimate people of the family. During COVID, the figures have increased 5-fold.
5-fold.
Yeah, if there was one lady that was calling the helpline, now it's 5 ladies calling the helpline. The reasons are restricted movement because they are not able to go out, social isolation, economic insecurity that is increasing women's vulnerability, to violence and homes around the world. And then the interesting part is there are 137 women killed every day by members of their own family.
Oh my God. In the world? In the world?
In the world, yeah. So there are 87,000 women that were intentionally killed in 2017. That's the latest figures we have. That's a really sad numbers. That means women are not secure in their own houses. And many of them were killed by people that were intimate with them, somebody of their family or their partner, intimate partner. And the second question, which is sadder, is only 40% of women that experience violence want to seek help because there is social stigma against it.
Right.
So they just stay quiet. So 60% of the women don't even come out and report it. So if we are saying there are 137 women that are killed on daily basis by someone of their family or their partner, it's probably double the figure. Because in our countries where women experience perhaps the most violence, they don't even report it.
Right.
So once you have those figures, that is when you go and tell people that, oh, these are figures, and the light comes on and they feel, wow, 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 wow. So people have to feel the need for elimination when they know these are the figures.
Right.
Okay. Now, how do we prevent it? You prevent it by legislating laws against physical violence.
Right.
And encouraging women, providing them custody. The women that come out, they should also know that they're secure. They go to a police personnel or they go to a social worker and report what happened to them. Many times they are victimized. So system is not very supportive of people that come out and report. And then we also need to do an education campaign.
So do you think that the talk which we have today is a part of education campaign also?
Absolutely. That is why I requested you that we do it on the day it happens. So people have to know what's going on with their women. There is also emotional violence. Many times we scream and shout and woman just sits there, doesn't say anything, and then you think it's okay. Nothing happened. So until we are able to have a very sustained campaign, remember years ago, there was a very strong campaign against AIDS.
Right.
Everywhere there was a poster on the highway. There was, you were reading about it. People were educating. There were talk shows on the TV. There were discussions on the radios. There were films made and there were movies made, and WHO was spending so much money. Unfortunately, we don't consider this element of that seriousness. I think there are more women that are killed and abused if there are 2 out of every 3 victims or suffering from this. That calls for some serious remedial action against it.
Dr. Banamali, now if just a thought only that in the current parliament, if you see that we have a big number of female, I think out of total, we have 35 females at this stage leading the nation, especially the Queensland. So these numbers, when you have these numbers, almost around 45% of the total number, do you think that ultimately these kind of changes which Premier took after this election will going to help this?
Look, this country, if you cannot compare apples and oranges.
Right.
Australia is a very enlightened country. Here, if there is a physical violence against a woman, she calls 000 right away.
Right.
Right, and police comes. So there is a fear inbuilt against the guy who wants to, the perpetrator. He knows that if I do something, I can go to police. I can be caught, I can be arrested, and I can be sentenced. The issue is not here. Issue is where it happens most.
Right.
As Professor Pittman would have told you, we were having discussion. He was head of a domestic violence unit in Queensland for 5 years.
Yeah.
He can tell you probably in very first-hand stories that he dealt with and how he counseled. But seriousness is not here. Many countries don't even recognize this as an element of their policing. That is where we need to, enforce it.
Right, right.
Unfortunately, United Nations is a voluntary organization. It doesn't have enforcing authority.
But police has the authority. Dr. Professor Grant Pittman, he was holding the authority.
Correct. Over here, yes, he did. But the problem is our mindset in our countries for the police is very macho man.
Macho man.
So if a woman goes to report, she's ridiculed. And she's cancelled and sent back. And then again, you see only 40% of the women that suffer actually report. And out of 40%, probably 10 or 15% actually get justice. So when the denial of justice is such a high, most other women are discouraged.
Right.
So the system continues.
So let me get the opinion of justice, role of the justice. Professor Pittman, Dr. Bernard Malik, ultimately he mentioned a lot of root causes, which may, if we eliminate them, we might eliminate the violence. Okay. He mentioned financial and social. Now, because you've been part of the system, you handle a lot of cases. Because at this stage, because we're in Australia and we'd like to ultimately get some experience of Australia and try to spread the message around the world. Ultimately, we can't do a lot of awareness directly in Pakistan, India, or these countries, but from using this platform ultimately. So what do you think that does the social values has more problem with this one, or finance basically has a lot of impact on these things? If we fix the financial issues of the families, maybe the violence rate would reduce.
Dr. Bernard was quite correct in his assertion. You've got to realise that Australia, according to the World Health Organization, United Nations, we're very low down in terms of the violence,
right,
compared to many other countries, except for perhaps the Aboriginal communities, which have a very high level. There is some research coming forward that migrants who come from countries like India, where that sort of violence is to a degree accepted, they're not reporting it, so we're not getting a clear picture of domestic violence in amongst immigrants here in Australia. What's worked here in Australia? Certainly the government brought in legislation across Australia nearly 30, 40 years ago, so that's had an impact. I think the government services have put several hundreds of millions of dollars into intervention strategies, from screening processes to education programs to rehabilitation type programs where they can. They've also put in screening processes between government departments, and there's been more work in cooperative arrangement between government departments.
Right.
Now, has it solved the problem? No, Australia still has a high number and it's still increasing, but not at huge numbers, but it still is increasing in Australia. The number of people who don't report it is probably the major concern.
Right.
They estimate next year that the rate at which domestic violence is occurring in Australia will cost the Australian community well over $15 billion.
Wow.
And that's emotional, psychological, physical, and so on. India, of course, is 100 times our size. If you multiply that by 100 times, you can see, I don't know what the currency in India is, but you can imagine the cost in India would be far, far more significant. So we have put more into the process of trying to assist violence. And of course, there are also men who are part of domestic violence as well. The highest suicide rate of Australia are actually men now.
Men.
Yes. And you've also got the homeless. The Aboriginal communities out west have poverty. They don't have a lot of housing. They don't have a lot of the support medical systems and those sorts of things. So again, they have a very high degree of domestic violence. So have we solved our problems here in Australia? No, we haven't, but we've done a lot of things to try and decrease the amount of domestic violence. Even the current police commissioner, Katarina Carroll, has made a comment that one of her major priorities is to try and significantly reduce domestic violence in Queensland. And the courts are part of that. There's more that could be done, certainly more in the intervention strategies. I'm a fan of not putting more ambulances at the bottom of the cliff, but putting more fences at the top of the cliff.
Yes,
right.
And if you look internationally, we don't put a lot, and as Dr. Malik said, we don't put a lot in prevention. We put it more in the end results of the problems we've got. And certainly the Canadian research on resilience and families, and the Americans have supported this, that perhaps we need more fences at the top of the cliff and less ambulances at the bottom.
At the bottom. Before moving to Dr. Bernard Mali, I still like to your opinion on this. You added, and it's a supplementary question from the talk you have earlier. You say that when the law change of the marriage, and from there the violence rate increase. So do you think that there is some relation with the marriage law? Okay, let me explain in my words that if we are married couple and where role responsibilities ultimately equal higher, and there is a not easy separation possibility, you know, there is a strong strings holding me for this relation. So do you think that it may affect the marriage, Professor Grant?
Look, some of the papers written that I've seen out of America by judges predominantly and prominent lawyers suggest that the changes in marriage laws, particularly divorce laws, have had an impact on domestic violence and commitments in relationships. Certainly there's a judicial view on that. Certainly I've read a paper by a professor called Bruce Hafen about United Nations conventions on children may be problematic in how relationships operate. Of note, the Americans didn't adopt that resolution or that convention. So there is an argument that the marriage relationship and how it's operated and divorce laws may have strong connections to what has occurred in relationships in the last 30 or 40 years.
Yeah. I think, Dr. Bernard Malik, I think that the same thing I like to know from you, that look like he's right that since last 30, 40 years, the law of marriage, relationship flexibility may added some causes to the violence. The reason, let me explain maybe. Initially it might not clear the way I like to say, like if we have the temporary relation concept, so you know, then I can abuse, women can be abused and easily can be rid of, and then you go next to next. However, if we have the marriage, ultimately I like, or we, you know, the people men like to survive as much as possible. So does it have any relation?
I would like to address that question, but before that, if I could go back, allow me to go back when we talked about women in parliament.
Yes.
And so that it would be less, but somebody sent me, listening to this, somebody sent me these figures, which is really, really strange. 82% of women parliamentarians, means women MPs, reported experiencing some form of psychological violence while serving their terms.
Oh my God.
That's what's happening. If women MP are not safe, and then 44% of them experienced receiving death threats, violent rape and assault.
We are talking about not a common female, not a common woman. We are talking about female MPs.
Yes. And if you look at the threat of violence against women is different in different regions. The highest is in Middle East and North Africa, sorry.
Yeah.
40 to 60% of women experience street-based sexual harassment. So it's way too common. I mean, in our countries, we think disrespecting women in front of your, you can see some jokes against women that we do is all part of acceptable culture there.
Yeah.
Yes. And then if you look at some of these figures are really scary. 15 million girls worldwide, younger girls, have experienced forced sex. That's extreme level of it's basically rape. Extreme level of violence against women. 200 million women and girls were married before the age of 18.
Yeah.
That's another form of violence.
And this happening in every part of the world. Every part of, you know.
And then when it comes to adult women trafficked, 49% of human trafficking victims are women. So these are scary figures. The world really needs to take note. Some of the things can easily be practically avoided at our home. If your woman is angry, walk away, 5 minutes, that's it.
That's it.
Things are different. Same thing can be practiced in our houses and our workplace, at our schools, anywhere. Yes, sir. You were asking him about...
Yeah, now we are almost at the last part, but I have two difficult questions and I like to get the answer or opinion from both of you. You just mentioned violence, women against women. What exactly form of violence you would like to say? Because maybe everybody does not understand exactly violence, women against women.
Okay. Before I address that, I will address that. There is a new form of violence now. And 1 in 10 women in Europe are experiencing cyber harassment from the age of 15.
Social media?
Social media harassment. See, that's a new form of violence. Okay. This violence of women against women is very strong in our countries. What happens is, generally, mother is head of the house.
Yes.
And when daughter-in-law comes in, mother feels that, you know, she brought up this son, and now all of a sudden son is being owned by somebody else.
Right.
Okay. So the first thing that starts is right away, you know, when she comes in, oh, you are not like this, you don't know, these are our traditions. Yeah, well, she doesn't know and she's not expected to know.
Right.
She's a new person, she's part of your family, keep it. And that also happens because we are not of the mindset where a son is married, now he should move out, he should have his own house. No, we want to keep our families together.
Right.
You want your son to live together and your other son live together. That doesn't work.
That doesn't work.
Yeah. So the mother-in-law abuses and physical violence against daughter-in-law to discipline her, so she is subject to her Majesty the Queen.
Right.
Which again ends up sometimes in death and other kinds of violence.
Professor, do you think that in your system, I know that in our system, mostly in Asian side, this is very normal. And again, it's required a lot of education and patience. In your system, do you feel, because you have, you have a deep family relation, you understand the whole culture, you understand the past history also. Do you think that this is also a form of violence in your system you also find somewhere?
Probably, if you're looking at Bernard's point of view, where there's relationship abuse within families,
yeah,
I would probably agree with Bernard on that one, that it's not just centric in Asia, and that I think You can find it in all sorts of relationships, and it can be over an economic issue. It can be over just personal views about each other. So I think what Dr. Bernard's suggesting is pretty common, and now they talk about family violence as an issue, which seems to extend the domestic violence as an individual issue to a family issue. And in Australia, and I see it in America too, where the deaths are not just the women, but the children as well.
Yes.
There was an horrific case here where the father threw petrol on the children and the mother and killed them all. I think it was involved 4 or 5 of them. So this issue of family violence is increasing at a very fast rate, where partners or husbands or a family member decides to finalise the act by killing everyone in the family. So there's no trace of the relationships as they existed. So
right. Yeah.
I sort of support Dr. Bernard.
Yeah. Okay. Now, the last question, which is quite different, but again, we all discuss in today's talk that, and we discussed that the rate of the violence coming higher and higher and higher and higher. And before show, I talked to Dr. Professor Pittman, and I like to know for my audience. Look, we all mature, we above 50, I believe, and we saw, we practice, we read also that before World War, when the woman was part of the house, looking after the house, it's a different kind of question again. So part of the house, then the man was looking after their things. Then we enhance our financial needs day by day, which is not finishing every day. It's look like that, I don't know, endless financial requirement. Do you think the past life where the woman was in the system, in the house, and not because when Dr. Manad Malik mentioned about the rape at the age of 15, forced sex and everything, do you think that it could be a reason that because we aiming lots and try to everyone get busy and try to do something, so there more risk and more opportunity involved for the violence? Professor.
I grew up in an era where my father went to work and my mother looked after the children.
Right.
But most of my children, their wives work. So we're living in a different era. Right. And I grew up in an era where duty was important, more so than entitlements. Right. And I grew up in an era where social responsibility was more important than personal benefits. So the values are changing in our society significantly, where there are more self-centered values, if I can term it that way. And I think people from my generation, and I'm getting into the older group now, are probably struggling with how our younger generation operate. Yeah. And we may, unfortunately, perhaps brand the younger generation for the violence because of the sense of, or the lack of duty and social responsibility. But as I always say, who trained them? Their parents did, or failed to. So perhaps the next generation shouldn't be held accountable. Perhaps the parents should be held strictly accountable for what they've taught their children.
Malik Saab, what you like to add on this? Because it's for me, I might add it as one of the eliminating reason also that, but we can't eliminate it at this level. As he says already, we are in a different era. Needs, but we have to find out exactly what is our needs. Is it social needs or financial needs? Malik Saab.
I think we look at the impact it has, and the current impact in Australia, the country we live in, it costs $21.7 billion to address issues related to violence against women.
$21.6 billion.
Yeah, 21.7 billion with B. And population of 25 million people. India has 1.3 billion people. I don't think the issue is recognized. So is Pakistan, so is other places. Yes, there is a tremendous economic and social impact on our society of the violence against women. If you don't have a happy mother, you will never have a successful child. He will never become a successful person in his life. There will be something missing all the time. That is why it's very important that we begin to respect our women. It is really important that we educate women not to have violence against their own kind. It is very important to teach our son to be a gentleman. Teach our lady, our woman to be a lady, our daughters.
Yeah, so Malik Sahab, the reason for this one that we operate in the double standard, like I'm expecting a different from my daughter's husband, and I'm expecting different from my son wife.
It's always there. You can see, society or you or me can never be colorblind when it comes to that level. Always partial. We like to see what we want. We just stand still.
Yeah, we are at the last. You like to add something?
And see, having different expectation is not wrong.
Right.
It is okay to have different expectations.
Right. Right. Malik Sahab, now we are on the last 5 minutes of our program, and we all experience. So I like to have a gift for our viewers from both of you. What could be the gift? I like a tip from you, from Dr. Bernard Malik, for a male, how to handle the violence at home. Similarly, I need a tip from Dr. Bernard Malik for a female, how to handle the violence at home. And then I go back to Professor Grant. Dr. Bernard Malik, tip, anything with your experience, with your understanding.
I think, as I said before, just walk away. You see a confrontational situation at home, walk away.
It's for the both.
For both. But then whoever is being at peace, walk away first. If you walk into your house and the lady is angry, walk away. That's it. It takes 5 minutes. And same thing for our ladies. It is not the end of the world. Just stay calm and walk away.
Malik Sahab, who is the major responsible in home? If it is a married life, who is the major responsible, so-called in culturally, a tag there that he's the major responsible, male or female?
It is hard to pinpoint. Yes, male, because he's a stronger gender, Absolutely. He can resort to violence.
Absolutely.
But that violence is only a result of something that has already happened. No man just walks into his house and starts beating. There's something wrong with him.
Yeah.
So there is something that got built up for that action to be taken.
Right.
So he himself or she, or there could be multiple reasons for it.
Yeah.
Stay quiet, walk away. It's only situation. It's not the end of the world.
Right. Professor Grant Pittman, I believe, I know that Dr. Bernard Malik has a lovely mother. Many times he discuss about his mom. He has a beautiful wife, lovely family, and lovely daughter also. I'm also similar lucky. I believe you also, because the concept you are sharing, teaching, mentoring the others. Now, what will be the tip to a male or female if the situation arises? We should have something from you.
I came up from a very church religious background.
Yeah.
And my father and mother always encouraged us to follow God's example and to be peacemakers. Doesn't mean that we were always kind to each other, but the Christian values were core. Also, my father was a very staunch believer in treating women with great respect and great courtesy, and they should be treated like a queen. And in our married life, my wife and I have continued that to use Christian principles, as well as my wife is treated like a queen. She doesn't get.
Are you treated like a king or not?
Yeah.
I'm not commenting on that one. We have taught that to our children, but I find that women have a very good nurturing capability, which explains to children why they should or shouldn't do things the way they do. And so my wife has a very good, gentle and nurturing way to help our children. And I think one of the things we wanted to do with our children was to make sure they were good citizens and not become involved in issues like violence. Has it stopped it? Look, there are obviously incidents that do occur, but 99% of the time they seem to be able to resolve their differences.
And last thing, who can be in case of failure, because this is I learned from my seniors, my teacher, people like you and Dr. Bernard Malik, and my mom, my dad, that if anything happens in the family, failure will be the man will be responsible for the failure. What is your opinion on this, Professor?
I'm a bit like Dr. Bernard. I believe that my wife and I are equals. And we discuss everything. We believe that an excellent decision by one person is not as good as a good decision made by two people.
Wonderful. That's a good
and we do a lot of pillow talking to resolve issues both between ourselves and our family. So we talk a lot.
Thank you. Dr. Bernard Malik, before closing, do you like to add anything?
I think that's one way of looking at it, and all your dad was trying to tell you is inspire you to be a nice gentleman in house, because for any reason, if marriage fails, you are to be blamed, and for that shame alone, you would behave. So it ensures a healthy, happy household, and it does. In your case, it definitely does. So that teaching from your father has really worked in your case.
Okay, and Dr. Bernard, are you satisfied with the talk today?
I think it's an excellent talk. We should do more often, because when you bring facts and figures before people, all of a sudden they realize there is something needs to be done.
Similarly, Professor Bernard, you're satisfied today, so I like to thank TV also.
I think, and I've said it to Dr. Bernard several times, with our backgrounds, we can cover a multitude of things.
Thank you.
And although politics is central to our lives, social issues make up the day-to-day issues that people are dealing with. And violence amongst people is just so prevalent now. And having been a policeman, 90% of the jobs I went to were over people's inability to get on with each other. From road rage through to domestic violence to armed robberies, whatever it was.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I think viewers, that's over from me. And I believe that today talk, as both mentioned, and let me add it today that Professor Grant says, one excellent decision by one person is better to have a good decision by two people, and it's better to have very good decision by three people, Shoaib Zaidi, Dr. Bernard Malik, and Professor Grant Pittman. And we decided to utilize these experienced people in Australia on a social issue also, not only the political issue. Ultimately, today talk was in addition to enhance awareness in our country also, not here. Ultimately, there's a lot of system works, and Dr. Bernard Malik states will going to enhance and awareness to the people. Look how much numbers overall in the world is leading these things. Similarly, the practice of Professor Grant Pittman, his policy procedures, information ultimately help us. So, and today I'm going to over the show, and I would like to thank Mr. Asad Jafary and his channel, also very flexible with us and understanding the needs of the Australia and very cooperative in their time, and especially thanks for a wonderful presentation. It's over from Shehzadi. Thank you, Dr. Bernard Malik. Thank you, Professor Grant Pittman. Thank you, sir. See you next time. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you very much.